Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Joanna Hernandez. On the show tonight,
there's no transparency.
Tensions flare in Brighton Park as residents sound off on a plan to move migrants into a vacant lot. And a local museum looks to acquire a vacant fire station in Little Village.
I remember my beginnings.
An award-winning composer workshops with music students at Northwestern. And now to some of today's top stories. A local alderwoman and her aide are recovering after being battered at a protest in Brighton Park this morning. Officials say 12th Ward Alderwoman Julia Ramirez declined medical attention and her aide was taken to St. Anthony's Hospital in fair condition. Tensions flared at the rally as community members sounded off on city plans to build a winterized base camp for migrants in a vacant lot in the area. Residents say the neighborhood is home to veterans and families who need the resources.
It doesn't feel good to be disregarded by the mayor, by the alderperson. She's supposed to represent all of us. She's clearly not representing all of us. This is a slap in the face to immigrants who have worked hard their entire lives to get here, who have raised their children with a hard work ethic.
A community meeting on the proposal is set to take place next Tuesday. You can find those details on our website. We'll have Alderwoman Ramirez's response for today's events and hear more from residents on the proposed migrant camp later in the program. A Chicago teen reaches a nearly $2 million settlement with the city of Des Plaines after being injured in a shooting. 4 years ago, Ryan Wilder, who was 15 at the time, was shot and critically wounded by a Des Plaines police officer inside a Chicago guitar store.
It's pretty nice to have gotten the settlement and this ruling, I guess. I would have liked to see a little bit more action on a larger scale, I guess, though, to ensure this would never happen again to anybody else.
Wilder, who is described as a guitar prodigy and the youngest person to perform at Riot Fest, underwent 18 surgeries. He was inside the store when he was shot by the officer who was trailing an alleged bank robber. In a statement, the city of Des Plaines says it does not admit to any wrongdoing or liability through the settlement and adds the officer was cleared of any wrongdoing. A positive sign for Chicago's finances. The Wall Street agency Fitch is upgrading the city's credit rating a notch to BBB+. Fitch sees the city's outlook as stable. The agency cited improved debt management practices as well as a decline in the city's long-term liability as factors for the rating hike. You can read more about this on our website. Up next, debate over a proposed migrant shelter. That's right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
As we heard earlier, Brighton Park community members rallied today against Mayor Brandon Johnson's plan to rebuild a winterized base camp for asylum seekers on a vacant, privately owned lot in the area. That's where a local alderwoman reports being assaulted. The massive camp would house at least some of the more 3,800 migrants now living at police stations and O'Hare Airport ahead of winter weather. Some residents are calling for more transparency from the city, while others are urging a more permanent brick and mortar plan. Joining us now with community reaction are Teddy Salazar, a Brighton Park resident and a business owner near the proposed site, and Andrea Ortiz, Director of Organizing for the Brighton Park Neighborhood Council. Now, we also invited Ward Alderwoman Julia Ramirez to join, but did not receive a response. Now, I want to start off with a statement from Alderwoman Ramirez following today's events. She said in part, after having a few conversations, it became clear that most of the protesters didn't want to engage in a peaceful conversation with me. She went on to say, I call on the mayor's office for more transparency, accountability, and to explore more options for establishing permanent solutions. Now, Andrea, let's start with you. The demonstrations got intense today, even violent. What was your reaction seeing this play out in your community?
As someone who was born and raised in Brighton Park and works still in Brighton Park, it's very disheartening to see, compared to the contrast to what we saw after Trump was elected in 2020 and the way that the community came together to fight deportation, to do mass like know your rights trainings, and really stood firmly in protecting and advocating for undocumented people and citizenship for all. So seeing the way that people responded to asylum seekers and newly arrived neighbors was really disheartening.
And Teddy, you work not too far from the proposed site. What did you see out there today?
Yeah, well, my partner definitely heard some of the fireworks that apparently were going off. I was not there, but I know that around this topic, like the best of our collective humanity really needs to emerge because this is a human rights issue. It's not just a Brighton Park issue, it's a human issue. And I think that the response to the alderwoman today and the response to the community in general is not representing the best of our collective humanity.
What more would you want to hear from the alderwoman, Teddy?
You know, it's not necessarily just from the alderwoman. I think it's like it goes beyond that. It goes to the city, it goes to the state. It's a federal issue, and I think there are two really heavy sides to this. Like there's many sides to this. It's a very complicated and layered issue of this encampment in the neighborhood. I think recognition of both and many of these different sides would be really important to hear. So I think like there's this one element that is very much like us versus them. Like we were immigrants too, but we've worked hard to be here. They're illegal. And a lot of it is rooted in misinformation. A lot of it is racist and xenophobic. The other side of this is that this is a military camp and virtually a detention center that we would be keeping people in the cold in Chicago. And I think that is where really the human rights issue comes. It is not safe conditions. It's not like having this encampment there is suddenly a solution. But again, there's layers to this. There's issues of where are people going to go? What is going to happen? Because the city and the older people, they're not doing enough, right? Like there's not a more brick and mortar plan, like you said.
And Andrea, you just mentioned that you were born and raised in Brighton Park. Can you just quickly tell me some of the challenges that the neighborhood and the community deals with? And on top of that, what would you say bringing, what would you say some of the issues that you have possibly with the camp tents being there?
Yeah, I mean, as an organization, and as a resident of Brighton Park, like we've been very firm and committed to continuing to demand more equity around the way that our schools are being funded, the jobs that are in our community, safety and what that really means. And that means like fully funding our communities and offering these resources to folks. So like as folks are coming in to the community and like newly arrived neighbors, I understand like some of those tensions that may arise, but I think that a lot of that anger is being misdirected, and it's like a lot of the impacts and disinvestment from our community has come from years of disinvestment from the city, from the state, from the federal government. And I think it's really hard, and like we want to be careful not to dismiss people's concerns and feelings, but also at the time we have an opportunity to demand for more resources for our communities. Like, yes, we welcome our new neighbors, and we need more money for our schools. We need more accessible housing. The federal government has a lot to blame for this, and they need to answer and step up and meet the moment and crisis that we're in now.
And Teddy, as we know, Chicago gets really cold during winter. In your opinion, I've asked this question many times. What is the right immediate solution that you see right now?
I mean, it's not that clear. I don't think there's one one final solution, and I think that's what makes this such a tense situation. Like, I think for me, like I own a daycare and a preschool not too far. I'm thinking of the children and the families and the people who are going to be out in the cold. So I think for us, what we can do, it's not like what the one solution is for everything that'll just answer it, but what we do have control over and what we can do is like activate in your own community, like gather resources, find a way to make sure that those resources are not just like being a box tossed off at a bunch of tents that you see. Like it needs to be like really intentional giving of jackets, blankets, things that people actually need, helping facilitate opportunities for people who are living in these sites to cook their own food and have food. And I think there's ways to do that in your community. We, as a program, we're going to be offering an educational event for families so that we can kind of understand what's actually happening. How is it actually going to affect our resources in our community? Kind of like what Andrea was saying, there's already overstaffed ESL teachers. There's already overstaffed programs for children. And what does it mean having more people in our community? It's not just about they're going to be criminals, because that's not actually what's happening. So I think find ways to gather, find ways to create community and work with your neighbors to do something to help the solution, and don't point a finger at the people, because it's not the people, it's the policies and it's the systems that we are living in that is causing this issue.
Yes, and I want to take a listen to what one of today's protesters had to say.
There's no transparency. Politicians before have represented Chicago in a way that benefited them initially and the wealthy. I get how Chicago was run before. They're trying to run it in a different way. It's not working.
Andrea, you talked about it a little bit, but what would you say that the city could provide that could help ease some of the tension and fears that residents are feeling right now?
I think people just want to plan. They want to know what's happening. And like Teddy had mentioned, like these encampments are not a solution and they should not be a permanent solution. And what I would like to see and we would like to see is for there to be what is the process in which people, if you're putting them in these encampments, okay, but like we understand it can't be a permanent solution. So what's the plan to get them out of there? What's the plan to offer them wraparound services? And also, like, hopefully this is not forever. What's the plan to use this space, this empty lot, for the community and really engage the community and intentional community processes for them to be like, I would love for there to be a grocery store here or park. There's no parks in Brighton Park. So it would be great to figure out like ways that we are listening to the community, their demands, and create something to continue to like uplift, like, yes, they're not wrong in demanding all these. And also, what's the city planning to do to meet the moment?
And Teddy, what impact could this tent city have on Brighton Park as a community if this goes into effect?
Some of the things that people in our community have been talking about, I think, are just, and like I said, like we've been kind of saying, like those fears are valid, but fear is not a reason to take action all the time, I think. And I think for us, it's not necessarily feeling like our community feels unsafe. In fact, if anything, the uneasiness in my community now that works with children, that works with people who are migrants, that works with people who are maybe living or have lived in these kinds of camps in Chicago, I think it's that we're more afraid of this anti-immigrant sentiment now, right? Like we're more afraid of that. It's not going to be walking by the encampment. That's our fear. So I think there's just this level of uneasiness and fear that's very, very stressful.
And I think you talked about it a little bit. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think you talked about a little bit about organizing information sessions for residents. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. So I know that we are going to be doing that with our program and like neighbors, people near us. And I think for us, it's talking about things like how we have people in our program whose families have been experiencing homelessness, family or friends, and they've had to deal with the very real fact that a lot of the shelters for people experiencing homelessness are full, like there's no space for people who are Chicago residents. That's frustrating. I understand that. And that's why some people are like, yes, we need these spaces for individuals. That, like I mentioned about schools, like these children who are coming are going to need to be enrolled in school, and they deserve that, and they deserve the right to education. But what does that mean for our teachers? What does that mean for the funding? Is the funding going to change at those schools? It's not, right? Like, so there's other things that I think we're thinking of that our community is seeing, and how it's going to affect like the bigger systems, not necessarily the immediate day to day.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and for your input. Our thanks to Teora Salazar and Andrea Ortiz. Up next, a vacant fire station in Little Village might be the newest addition to a museum. We explain right after this. After being vacant for more than a decade, a former firehouse in Little Village is not only on the way to getting landmark status, but is expected to be transformed into a center for the community. Here to tell us more are Vanessa Sanchez, the director of Yoccali Arts Reach, an initiative of the National Museum of Mexican Art, which is looking to buy the firehouse from the city for $1, and Ward Miller, the executive director of Preservation Chicago. Thank you both for joining us now. Vanessa, I want to start with you. Can you tell me about the renovation plans for this building? Why do you want this space?
Yeah, the museum was on a mission to find a new space for Yoccali to expand the programming. We really wanted to be able to provide more programming to young people. We are currently located in the Little Village Boys and Girls Club. That's more on the western end of Little Village. And when the opportunity came up to look into this firehouse, we were really excited to be closer to the eastern side of Little Village and provide more arts programming, cultural programming, and just mentorship for young people.
And the firehouse is cool. I feel like going into a firehouse. Now we know, Ward, I want to go to you. We know the firehouse also seeking landmark destination as part of the proposal. What makes this firehouse significant for the community?
Sure. Well, you know, it's an orange rated building, which means that it was determined by the city to be important in the Chicago Historic Resources Survey that was published in 1996. And we have a number of firehouses that were built by all of us, or our ancestors, if you will. And this is an important building, and there have been a number of Chicago firehouses that have been landmarked over time. So this is a great step forward to preserving a great building.
Have you got a chance to go inside?
No, not yet.
So
I look forward to that tour.
And Vanessa, a big part of Yoccali is including young people in the organization as much as possible. What will they have? What will be their say in these plans?
Yeah, actually, we've been meeting with young people, with community members for the past year, really, to talk about this firehouse and what they want to see there, how they want it to look, what is the feel they want to have when they walk into the space. And the biggest thing that they said is they want one area to be just for them and one area to be for the community. So that first floor is going to be really for the community. It'll be a big open space for gatherings, for performances, for events. And then the top floor is for the young people. So that's where all the programming will happen, from ceramics, visual arts, digital design, digital music programming, and really just, again, it's a gathering space for Little Village.
And I bet it's exciting for them.
So
that
exciting.
They can call, like, this is mine.
Yes.
You don't often see that in communities.
Yeah, actually a lot of young people who have been through our program consistently say that Yoccali has been their second home. And so we're really excited to be able to offer this new opportunity.
Oh, that's great. Now, so often, to you, Ward, so often we think of city landmarks, we think of tall buildings, downtown, churches, and similar things. Why do you think it's important to include more neighborhoods like Little Village when landmarking?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to share what landmarking is in Chicago, and landmarks are for everybody. And you know, it's not just the big buildings and the churches, but buildings that are significant to the community or offer a wonderful opportunity like this program in a former fire station. And you know, so how wonderful is that? It brings us all together, and we have very few Latinx landmarks in the Little Village and Pilsen community. We have St. Adalbert coming along, and we have the Little Village Arch that we help to get landmarked. But, you know, this really does, address a segment of the population in the neighborhoods that are so important.
You've been doing this work for a long time, so
oh
you know
my
how
gosh, I had
important
brown hair when I started this.
So you know how important it is to
Yes.
have these places landmarked in communities like Little Village.
Yes, and I was born at St. Anthony's Hospital in Little Village too, a number of years back.
So when you heard about it, you're like, okay, this is great.
I get excited.
You still get
about this.
excited.
I do. Because you know what? That excitement is shared by others in the community and at the city. And, you know, landmarking is a good story. You know, compared to what we see in the headlines, this is really a wonderful opportunity. So we're excited, and we will support this landmark through the whole process.
That's great. And Vanessa, how do you hope this project will impact and engage more young people in the community?
Yeah, we're hoping to provide more programming, more opportunities, internships, paid after-school programming, summer programming. Right now, we technically serve about 250 youth a year, so we're hoping to double that with this new space.
Wow, so that just expands.
Yes, exactly.
Wow, can you also just tell me a little bit more about what the young people are saying? Like something that, you know, when they found out this was going to happen, what is one of the first things that they mentioned?
Just that they're just so excited to see it from the ground up, to really know that their voice is really being a part of this design process, and that all those little parts that they were hoping to see can be in that building when it opens. So it's really been a pleasure. Definitely lots of disco balls, lots of neon lights,
Disco
lots of
balls.
colors. Yes, that is
Disco
a thing.
balls.
Yeah, we're really excited.
Can you tell me what are the next steps to acquire the building?
Yes, so it's still pending City Council approval, and then after that, we're hoping that we can acquire the building by either the end of this year or the early next year. Then it's construction and hopefully opening around 2025.
Wow, so not so far. We're in 2023, so it's
Yeah.
around the corner. Time goes by so fast.
Yeah.
And Ward, for people who don't know, what are the next steps to landmarking a building like the firehouse?
So the city needs to prepare a landmarks designation report, and then it needs to go before the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and that would start the process with a preliminary landmark recommendation. And there's about 5 or 6 steps through that process, and we'll be there with the community and our partners to landmark this building and make sure that it gets into good hands, and we'll be there at City Council meetings to also support this.
Can you tell me about other projects that you're working on?
Well, yes, we're working. I hope one day we'll be there to preserve St. Anthony's Hospital as a reuse when St. Anthony's moves to their new building, their new campus. We'd love to see that building preserved. We also have the Century and Consumers buildings that the feds, the federal government, and the GSA wants to demolish on State Street. This is right next to the Berghoff at State and Adams and State and Quincy. One is a 16-story, one is a 22-story building, Chicago School, early skyscraper buildings, and we're hoping that we will prevail and maybe make this an architecture center and an archives center as well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for both of you for joining me today. And our thanks to Vanessa Sanchez and Ward Miller. Up next, sounds of an award-winning composer working with local students. But first, a look at the weather. She's an Afro-Cuban Latina composer who has made her mark by following the rhythm of her own beat. Tanya Leon's pieces carry her Caribbean influences with sounds of her travels around the world. We met with Leon to hear more about her award from Northwestern University's music department.
From the very beginning, the piece needs to have the drive.
Every note counts. We met Tanya Leon inside a music hall at Northwestern's Binnen School of Music.
What about the wildness of the soloists? Something happened. Yeah. You're too timid right now. It's gonna be okay.
The contemporary music ensemble is preparing to play one of Leon's pieces called Toque.
It's good now. I think so. And percussion, what I just told you, it doesn't mean disappear.
Leon has a remarkable body of work and a journey she says has taken her around the world, landing her numerous awards, including the Pulitzer Prize in Music. This year, Northwestern's music department awarded her the Nemers Prize in Music Composition.
Let me tell you something. It's not feeling humble, but the thing is that it is like, I don't know what it is, that I remember my beginnings. I remember my grandmother, she heard the piece so many times that if I made a mistake, she would be in the kitchen and say, "You made a mistake."
Thinking beyond labels and boundaries is what Leon says she wants students to take away as she hosts workshops and coaching sessions over the next 2 years.
The thing is that I think that the culture of a person is the sum total of the experiences of that person that have created their own language. And that's what we call, that's my language. That's me, what I represent.
Leon keeps her humble beginnings in Havana close to her heart, praising her family for supporting her dreams at a young age. Now her pieces have been played on stages across the world.
I'm a metamorphosis of all of these influences. And sometimes, I'm writing and they come back to me, and I try to be very, regardless of the kind of music that I'm doing, I like to be spontaneous and allowed what came to my mind, to be there.
What would you say at this point in your life is your dream?
My dream is to continue living until the day I have to get out of here.
Now, Leon is working with the students on an ongoing basis for the next 2 years. Now, we also chatted about foods that she needs to try while visiting, and one of those being Chicago's inventions, a jibarito sandwich. And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that's our show tonight. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 7 for the Weekend Review. And we leave you tonight with a look at the Shedd Aquarium's newest penguin chick taking its first dip. You can read more about the rockhopper penguin on our website. Now, from all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Joanna Hernandez. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.